Without a doubt, a series of discoveries, both in recent times and old, have proven that the old tales and biblical stories that we grew up to hear and believe in are no fables but true stories with traceable histories. Being a notable race around which most biblical narratives revolved, Israel and its environs is fertile ground with a rich archaeological landscape. As a result, it hardly ever passes a month without a 2,000-year-old piece of human history being unearthed. Before now, there have been theories and concepts like those of archaeologist Israel Finkelstein and Dr. Philip R. Davis of the University of Sheffield that seem not to agree with some of the Bible stories we know because there was no evidence to support their existence. However, in this video, I will show you 5 insane biblical discoveries that have turned the narrative and put biblical minimalists on the defensive. To start the ball rolling, we have the Tel Dan Stealer. Even though the Bible remains a true powerhouse of Christian belief, a trend known as the Bible minimalism grew during the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s, which focused on disregarding any biblical stories with no true evidence or traceable roots. Because they don't think the Bible is actually reliable in terms of date accuracy, minimalists believed that such stories have very little historical significance. For instance, according to Dr. Philip R. Davis of the University of Sheffield, I'm not the only scholar who feels that the figure of King David is about as historical as King Arthur. Furthermore, the United Kingdom of David and Solomon, represented in the Bible as a regional force, was at most a small tribal kingdom, says archaeologist Israel Finkelstein. He went on to say that David's kingdom was merely 500 individuals with sticks in their hands shouting, cursing, and spitting. According to these Bible minimalists, the biblical accounts of King David's enlarged reign are only legends and myths. However, the narrative changed upon the discovery of the Tel Dan Stealer. At Tel Dan, the location of the ancient city of Dan in northern Israel, archaeologists were conducting excavations in 1993. Suddenly, they came upon a fragmented stone with an Aramaic inscription measuring a rough width of 22 centimeters and height of 32 centimeters while excavating a section of a wall. Following that, 2 further Stealer fragments were discovered the following year. The inscription made an immediate splash and forced minimalists, who had bragged that there was no proof of King David outside of the Bible directly, on the defensive. The Stealer describes how the king of Aram defeated the king of Israel and his ally, the king of the House of David, in a victory that is most likely attributed to Hazael, even though he is not named. It was created around 200 years after David's reign, in the 9th century BC. The sight of the term House of David ignited a fire in the archaeological community because it was the first time David was mentioned straightforwardly. Joseph Garfinkel, an archaeologist, interprets the significance of the inscription by saying that the House of David refers to the Davidic dynasty. The Davidic dynasty is mentioned for the first time outside of the Bible in an inscription on this stone tablet built by Hazael, the king of Aram, which is present-day Syria. The reference to a military triumph in the inscription is in line with a biblical event in 2 Chronicles 22. Through this archaeological discovery, we are now fully aware and confident that David existed and that he founded a dynasty. David is not a mythological character, as is abundantly obvious from this finding. Thus, the mythological paradigm abruptly fell apart and was never again heard of. How about some unbelievable engineering technology like Hezekiah's Tunnel? Who would have thought that there would be something as amazing as the Hezekiah's Tunnel in such a primitive era when there was no modern or sophisticated technology? This magnificent water tunnel, which was formerly part of the city of David, is today found in eastern Jerusalem's Arab suburb of Silwan. Hezekiah's Tunnel, a 530-meter, 1,750-foot tunnel dug under the reign of Hezekiah to transport water from one side of the city to the other, and the Greek tunnel of Euphalios from the 6th century are regarded as 2 outstanding examples of pre-classical water engineering technology. The overall length of the tunnel would have been 1,070 feet, 330 meters, or 40% shorter if it hadn't been in a straight line. Edwin Robinson discovered this historic aqueduct in Jerusalem in 1838, and later, in 1880, several young people who were exploring the aqueduct found a prehistoric Paleo-Hebrew inscription inscribed on the tunnel's wall. It has been determined that the lettering dates to Hezekiah's reign in the 8th century BC. The inscription describes how the workers who dug the tunnel began in opposite directions from the north and south and came together in the center. In relation to this, the Bible speaks of the preparation King Hezekiah made when he learned that Sennacherib, the Assyrian king, was already en route to besiege Jerusalem. As seen in 2 Chronicles 32, 2, 4, 30, When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that he intended to make war on Jerusalem, he consulted with his officials and military staff about blocking off the water from the springs outside the city, and they helped him. A large force of men assembled, and they blocked all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water? They said. It was Hezekiah who blocked the upper outlet of the Gihon spring and channeled the water down on the west side of the city of David. Furthermore, 2 Kings 20:20 summarizes Hezekiah's life this way. As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements and how he made the pool and tunnel by which he brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Conclusively, it is safe to say that both the Solom inscription and Hezekiah's tunnel offer important proof of the historical events recorded in the Bible. Hezekiah's tunnel is one of Israel's top tourist destinations today for anyone interested in biblical history. In fact, you can walk through the knee-deep water by using the old aqueduct that King Hezekiah's troops carved. With the diggings and carvings of this amazing tunnel, one would not be surprised at the existence of ancient inscriptions like the Assyrian inscriptions. In brief, the Assyrians were a prehistoric people who lived in what is modern-day Syria, Iraq, and Iran between 1500 and 612 BC. The Assyrians were once part of Mesopotamia, a larger cultural area that also included the Babylonians and the Sumerians. The Assyrian beautiful architecture and art are cherished and exceptionally preserved thanks to the Assyrians. I'm not going to mention a wholesome list of Assyrian artifacts because of their numbers. Nevertheless, I will use many Assyrian inscriptions as a whole because they combine to prove historical facts about several Israelite kings as well as build a biblical timeline. First, let's examine the Assyrian kings' annals. The Assyrians and the nation of Israel had several contacts, which were documented in their historical records. King Ahab is listed in one inscription, the Kirk monolith of Shalmaneser III, as a member of a Western alliance that battled Shalmaneser III in the War of Karkar, which was fought in 853 BC. Also, King Jehu offered tribute to Shalmaneser in 841 BC, according to another inscription discovered on the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser III. In actuality, the Black Obelisk is the only representation of a Hebrew ruler that has been found so far, and it features a carving of Jehu as he bowed before Shalmaneser. We can, however, date the chronological listing of Israelite and Judahite kings found in the biblical books of Kings and Chronicles by using the dating of these inscriptions. Scholar Edwin Thiel was able to effectively reconstruct the timeline of the whole Hebrew monarchy using these dates in his book, The Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings. Next on, Assyrian Limo lists. Although no precise dates are mentioned in the Old Testament, relative dates, such as a prophecy referring to a specific time year in a king's reign, can be found. For instance, Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, took office as king of Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah, 1 Kings 15:25. But then, have you ever wondered if a precise biblical chronology is established or assembled using any actual time frame? Straight to the point, yes. It is possible, thanks to the various Assyrian Limu lists that have been discovered. Right from inception, the Assyrians had a tradition of naming every year after a particular individual, known as the Limu, who could only be a top court official, the ruler of a province, or even the king himself. And the year named after a specific Limu was subsequently used to date historical events. Numerous cuneiform tablets were found in Nineveh by Austin Henry Layard during his excavations, including 4 copies of the Assyrian Limu lists, which detailed almost 250 years of Assyrian history, dated to precise years and named after particular people. Researchers have been able to cross-reference a large number of additional Assyrian Limu lists, which has increased our understanding of Assyrian history. On one tablet, a solar eclipse that occurred in the month of Simu during the Limu Bersegal year was noted. According to astronomy, this solar eclipse took place on June 15th, 763 BC. We can now accurately date more than 250 years of Assyrian history thanks to this amazing discovery. Many Old Testament events can now be placed in a precise chronological order thanks to the kings of Assyria's annals and the Limu lists. From the ever-thrilling crossing of the Red Sea to the river's salty nature, the warm temperatures of about 30 degrees Celsius, one would wonder what more could be discovered around the Dead Sea. Yes, there's more. A goat herder found Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of the prehistoric acts of ancient humans were discovered along the shores of the Dead Sea. In a cave at Qumran, close to the Dead Sea, a Bedouin goat herder unexpectedly found numerous writings in 1947. He gave them to a Christian antiquities dealer in Bethlehem, which ultimately attracted the interest of many researchers and scholars all over the world. Numerous explorations of 30 additional caverns beyond 1947 and 1956 led to the discovery of additional scrolls in 11 of those caves. There were about 980 scrolls writings discovered overall, from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD. Some of the Hebrew scriptures were found in 230 of these manuscripts. Every book of the Old Testament, with the exception of the book of Esther, was represented in these manuscripts, though the majority were only partially complete. Prior to this discovery, the Leningrad Codex, which dates to 1008 AD, was the oldest comprehensive Old Testament copy. Although not much changed, scholars were able to gauge how much the biblical text had altered during its more than 1,000-year transmission period, thanks to the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. According to Holden and Giesler's summary of the relevance of the Dead Sea Scrolls in their book, The Popular Handbook of Archaeology and the Bible, the discovery of the scrolls turned out to be a crucial connection to an interconnected chain of writings that helped verify the textual dependability of the Old Testament scriptures. A chain whose links date from 600 BC, the Ketiv Hinnom Scrolls, to AD 1008, Codex Leningradensis. It's imperative to keep in mind that these manuscripts were written at a time when there was no official standard text from which to transmit the Hebrew Bible. As a result, they provided researchers with significant information on how the Hebrew scriptures were transmitted and copied over the years, since they contain biblical passages that are almost 1,000 years older than any Hebrew manuscripts previously discovered. To draw the curtain, let's talk about the Moabite Stone. The Mesha Stela, also known as the Moabite Stone, is an ancient inscription written by Mesha, king of Moab, in the late 9th century BCE. Elements of the inscription correspond to the stories in the Hebrew Bible. The first inscription gives two different accounts of how Mesha led Moab to victory over ancient Israel. First, he asserts that he routed ancient Israel on several fronts, taking or recovering a number of cities and killing the occupants. Second, Mesha asserts to have rebuilt or renovated numerous cities and structures, including a fortress, a king's palace, and water storage systems. The actions of Mesha, king of Moab, at approximately 840 BC, are described in an engraving on a black basalt stone monument that an Anglican missionary by the name of Frederick Klein found in Jordan in 1868. The Moabite stone, also known as the Mesha Stela, has 34 lines of Moabite writing on it that recount the same incidents as 2 Kings 3. This verse describes how Moab previously served as Israel's subject before rebelling. According to 2 Kings 3, 4-6, now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he had to deliver to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So King Jehoram marched out of Samaria at that time and mustered all of Israel. The King Mesha Stela is one of the most significant direct descriptions of world history that is mentioned in the Bible. The inscription honors the ruler by highlighting his magnificent construction projects and conquests of the Israelite kingdom under Ahab, his son Omri. More interestingly, the word Israel is used for the first time in writing on this stela. The capital of this Moabite kingdom, Dahaiban or Al-Daiban, was situated on the left bank of the Dead Sea, where the stela was discovered. Here are some reasons why this Moabite stone is important. First, there is a mention of YHWH in it. Mesha claimed to have taken altar hearths of Yahweh from Israel as part of the loot, lines 17 to 18. This is the first time outside of the Bible that Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, is mentioned. Second, it also makes mention of the House of David. In 1994, André Lemaire was able to differentiate a previously undefined letter, leading to the translation of the phrase House of David. This would be the first mention of King David and his dynasty outside of the Bible. Lastly, the events in 2 Kings 3 and other biblical passages are supported by the stela. It demonstrates that Moab was under Israel's control but rebelled. It demonstrates that Chemosh was the main deity worshipped by the Moabites. It even confirms the fact that Mesha was a sheep herder. These are just a few from the wholesome list of mind-blowing, yet convincingly biblical discoveries that researchers have brought to the limelight. One thing is for sure, more biblical discoveries are going to unfold as time goes on.